But even when you're not in a full-time kollel or Beis Medrash, you still got to continue to grow. You got to steig. Aliyah in Torah is not an all or nothing. People make a mistake sometimes. I'm either like fully immersed or forget about it. That's a very, very big mistake. A person has to grow. So in whatever environment you're in, you can become a Talmid Chacham, you can finish Shas, you can know many, many sugyas. And if we have the opportunity to do it, that means we have the responsibility to do it. Anything we're able to do in Reconnect, HaKadosh Baruch Hu expects us to do.
We're here at Yarchei Kallah learning with all businessmen and reconnecting to Ohr Somayach.
I always tell my kids, I say, your best friends are the ones that you spend time learning Torah together with.
A highlight for me was definitely seeing Rabbi Breitowitz, learning with Rabbi Breitowitz on the Yarchei Kallah. Someone I always saw in speeches and listened to his Q&A. He's always so clear in a special anav way. To see him in person and to hear from him was an incredible experience.
My name is Anthony Knopf. I live in Montreal. I'm the rabbi of Congregation Beth Orah. It's a tremendous privilege to hear shiurim from such world-class Talmidei Chachamim, Rabbi Breitowitz, Rabbi Weiss.
Hi, my name is Yoshem Kestemam. I'm from Monsey. I heard about the Yarchei Kallah program through Rabbi Breitowitz's shiurim. I can say I come from a Hasidic background, Baruch Hashem, but I'm going home and I'm inspired to become a Bal Shiva. The Navi says there will come days before Mashiach that people will be hungry and thirsty to hear the Dvar Hashem. And this is what we're seeing here in Ohr Somayach. Thank you so much.
This is the very first official Yarchei Kallah trip. I heard about it through the alumni email. I was very, very excited for Ohr Somayach to start such program. It is amazing.
It's just hard to believe it's the first time in my life that I'm in Ohr Somayach. There are very few Jews in the entire world, in the frum world, that didn't hear of Ohr Somayach. Maybe first, foremost, definitely one of the greatest centers of Kiruv L'Choikim in the entire world, and for decades. So for me, it's a zchus and a privilege to be here.
In Parshas Shelach is a very, very pivotal parsha. This is the parsha when 12 spies are sent to check out Eretz Yisrael. They come back on the 8th of Av. They're gone for 40 days. They come back on the 8th of Av. 10 of the 12 give a very negative report, how the Canaanites are so big and strong and tall and there's no way we could survive and there's no way we could be successful. There's only 2 good spies, Yeshua and Kalev. They give their report on the 8th of Av. That night, the whole congregation weeps and cries, and Hashem decrees that this generation shall wander in the desert for 40 years. They shall die out, and only the new generation shall enter the land. Now, Chazal actually tell us that since the night that they cried was the 9th of Av, Hashem decreed that you cried for no reason on this night. This night will become the night of eternal crying and mourning, the 9th of Av. So in other words, the Chetz HaMeraglim is connected to the Chorban Beis HaMikdash on the 9th of Av. Now, the way it works, just to understand the mechanics a little bit, basically the only people who were condemned to die were those who were 20 years old and up. So the people that survived were either the people who were born in the desert, or even if they left Mitzrayim, but they were not yet 20 at the time of the Meraglim. So they could have left Mitzrayim at 18 or whatever it is. They were not yet 20 at the time of the Meraglim. What's a little ambiguous, this is a little ambiguous, is what if you were less than 20 at the time of the Exodus, but you became 20 by the time of the Spies? That's a little unclear, meaning is the definition of 20 is 20 at the time of the Exodus, or 20 at the time of the Spies, which is around a year and a half later? So I'll leave that as a little bit of an interpretive question. But certainly, if you were under 20 at the time of the Spies, you lived. If you were over 20 or over at the time of the Spies, you died. So nobody died unless they were 20, at least at the time of the Spies. Now, the 40 years also has to be understood. The wandering for 40 years is not from the spies. It is from Yetzias Mitzrayim, meaning from the time we left Egypt till the time we came to Eretz Yisrael is 40 years. So in reality, the amount of wandering we incurred as a result of the spies was 38 and a half years. Okay, 40 years is the whole period from leaving Mitzrayim till coming to Eretz Yisrael. Now, the Talmud Yerushalmi, which Rashi and the Gemara brings, he doesn't bring it in Chumash, has a very interesting idea. The Talmud Yerushalmi says that nobody died before the age of 60. And the way it worked was, every night of the 9th of Av, for the rest of the 40 years, all of the old generation dug their graves, and they slept. I'm not sure if they went to sleep, but they slept in their graves. And anyone who had reached the age of 60 in the preceding year would not wake up. So everybody went through the symbolic experience of death, but the only people who died were those who reached 60. So that's how you get the 40 years, because the concept would be that the Gezerah is on those who are 20. So over 40 years, the 20-year-olds would reach 60, and they would die in the last year. So in year 1, the people who were 60 died, or older. Year 2, the people who were 59, who then became 60, died. In year 3, the people who were 58, who then, by 3 years, became 60. Now, the arithmetic here is not that easy to figure out, because since you only have 38 and a half years, it doesn't quite work out. I've been struggling with this problem without exaggeration for 50 years, and I cannot work out, it kind of drives me crazy all the time. I cannot work out the exact mathematics of how it works, but you understand the concept. The concept was that everybody died on the Tisha B'Av that followed their 60th birthday. And that's why the deaths of the Dor HaMidbar occurred over such a very, very long time, from the 20 to the 60 range. Now, who was spared? Meaning, who entered Eretz Yisrael eventually? So we have a few categories. Anybody who was under 20 at the time of the spies entered Eretz Yisrael, number one. Number two, women, even older women. Women were not nichlal in the Chet of the Meraglim. It's very, very interesting. Women come across very well in the Chumash. Women were not nichshal in the Chet HaEgel, and they were not nichshal in the Chet of the Meraglim. They had emunah b'Hashem. So we have women. Number three, Rashi says, although there's no source in the Psukim, Shevet Levi didn't die in the Dor HaMidbar. Shevet Levi, remember, they did not send a spy. Shevet Levi survived and entered Eretz Yisrael even from the old generation. And number four is, of course, Yehoshua and Kalev, who were the two good spies who were exempted. Now, number five, there is a shita in Tosfos that the very last year in the desert, when you still had people who had just reached 60, that they should have died, right? The people who hit 60 in year 40, there was actually an amnesty. And the last group of people did not die. Now, if you take an average, now this doesn't mean this is the number that died, but if you take the average, divide 600,000 by 40, so that gives you 15,000, which means on the average, again, this is not necessarily the reality, but on the average, 15,000 people a year died. And that's besides the other Averos, like Korach. I mean, there were other deaths for Averos, but in terms of the Gezerah, the decree on the Dor HaMidbar, it would be 15,000 a year. So it turns out, if there was an amnesty the last year, there were 15,000 people who were 60 years old who entered Eretz Yisrael. This is very difficult because the Torah says more than once that it's only Yehoshua and Kalev of the old generation that entered. According to this, it's Yehoshua, Kalev, and 15,000 of their closest friends. It's a kasha, and not everybody agrees with that, but there is indeed a shita that there was an amnesty in year 40. And in fact, some explain that this is the joy of the 15th of Av. Right, you know the Gemara, the Mishnah says in Maseches Tanis that the 15th of Av was the happiest day of the Jewish calendar. So let me explain how Rashi interprets it. Very, very fascinating. It was Tisha B'Av of year 40. And based on the average, there are 15,000 guys who had reached their 60th birthday who are supposed to die. They're the only ones left other than Levi, women, Yeshiva Kallah. So they dig their graves. They go into their graves. They expect they're not going to wake up because they had their 60th birthday. But the next morning they open their eyes and they're awake. What's going on? They're supposed to die. So they figured maybe we miscalculated the date. And it's not yet the 9th of Av. So they repeated it on the 10th, on the 11th, on the 13th, on the 14th. But what happens on the 15th of a month? You see a full moon. So when they saw the full moon on the 15th of the month, they knew that Tisha B'Av had come and gone, and they saw that God in His mercy did not kill the last 15,000. And that, according to Rashi's interpretation, is at least one of the reasons why the 15th of Av was a tremendous day of simcha. But as I say, that only works if you go with the idea that the last 15,000 didn't die. Some learn a little differently, that indeed the last 15,000 did die, and the 15th of Av is Shiva, is the 7th day. So they sat Shiva for the last generation, and on the day that we got up from Shiva, the Shekhinah came back to Klal Yisrael. So that's the simcha, a little different. So I'm just pointing out that there's this is a pretty huge machlokas actually. If the last 15,000 died or they didn't die, right? I guess machlokas Rashi in different shitas of Tosas. But be it as it may, the Cheder Meraglim itself was a huge, huge deal. Now here's the thing. Let's look precisely, what is the sin? We call it the sin of the spies. Was it a sin for Moshe to send spies? Is the argument that if you truly believe in God and God promised you the land, what are you sending spies to check it out? So Ramban actually says a very important point. There was nothing sinful in sending spies to check out the land. And the reason for that is very simple. Even if God promises you the land, you have to have an army, you have to have a military strategy. This is what we call hishtadlus, the same way you got to get a job to make a living or whatever it will be. So Memela, the shiluach hameraglim is actually not an aveira. It's a legitimate hishtadlus, even if God gave you a promise. So Moshe and the people are not criticized because they sent spies. And the Ramban has two proofs to his proposition. The first proof is in the book of Yoshua, when we wage war against Jericho, right? Jericho is the very first city that we conquer. So in Perek Beis of Sefer Yehoshua, what does it say? Yehoshua sent 2 spies to check out the vulnerabilities of Jericho. Now, who more than Yehoshua knows how catastrophic the Meraglim were? He was one of the original 12, and he saw what happened. But the Ramban says, as long as he sent proper people, nothing wrong with sending spies. That's part of a military strategy. The second proof he brings is a little more obscure, but it's even a better proof. Moshe Rabbeinu himself sends spies. Later we're going to see that the Jewish people wage war east of the Jordan and they conquer the land of Sichon, the king of the Amori. That's the land that was eventually settled by the 2.5 tribes east of the Jordan, Ruvain, Gad, and Chatzi Shevet Menashe. So it says there was a town called Yazer, and Moshe Rabbeinu sent spies to check out Yazer. This is 40 years or 39 and a half years after, or 38 and a half years after the Chet HaMeraglim. So the Ramban says, Avada, there is no issue in sending spies. So what is the Chet? So the Chet is twofold. The Chet, number one, is the editorializing of the spies. The spies were given the job. It's like a journalist who in the middle of a news story inserts all of his own opinions. So and the normal ethic of journalism, although it's widely broken today, is just the facts, ma'am, give me the facts, don't give me your opinions. The Meraglim had no right to say, we can't do it, we can't make it. Hashem said, yeah, your job is just to say strong points, weak points, vulnerabilities, etc. So Avera number one was the editorializing of the Meraglim, which created fear and anxiety among the people. But of course, that was only the Meraglim sin, and for that they died. They died right there. The Meraglim didn't linger for 40 years. The Meraglim were just wiped out. But the other Avera, of course, is the response of the people. And that is the people lacked emunah, they lacked bitachon. They bring up this old argument, which on one level doesn't even make sense. Let's go back to Mitzrayim where life was so great. Yeah, right. Life was so great in Mitzrayim with the onions and the garlic and the fish and all of that good stuff. You see that when people are worried, what do they say? The hell that I'm familiar with is better than the hell that's unknown. I'll go back to Mitzrayim. At least I know what that is. As bad as it was. So that was the big Avera. Now, the big question everybody asks is, though, that Rashi makes the point that the Meraglim that Moshe chose, all of the Meraglim, all 12 of them, were actually righteous and saintly people. It wasn't that 10 of them were bad and 2 of them were good. All 12 were good. Kulam anashim, all of them are people. Rashi interprets meaning all of them are tzaddikim. So if all of them are tzaddikim, how could it be that 10 of the 12 came back with such a negative report? How could the tzaddikim be nichshel? How could they stumble in terms of that negative report? So here is the thing. So again, the way the Mefarshim try to explain it, of course it's an Avera. I mean, we're not going to be able to say it's not an Avera. It certainly is an Avera. The Torah says that. But we're going to see it's a more sophisticated Avera that is a certain calculation, l'shem shamayim. And that is, keep in mind that the way Hashem deals with Am Yisrael in the Midbar is very, very different than the way he's going to deal with them in Eretz Yisrael. In the Midbar, the hand of God is open, miraculous. We have man coming from the heaven every single day. Heavenly bread. It's brought down that there was a bracha on the man. But you didn't say hamotzi lechem min haaretz. You said hamotzi lechem min hashamayim, because man is called the bread min hashamayim. Hamotzi lechem min hashamayim. So they had the miraculous man. They had the clouds of glory that surrounded them. They had a traveling source of water. Remember, the man came in the merit of Moshe, and the clouds of glory came in the merit of Aaron, and the Be'er, the water, came in the merit of Miriam. Supernatural existence. An existence where every single moment you saw the glory of Hashem. We still did Averos. That didn't immunize us, but we saw the covenant of Hashem. What did you do in the Midbar when you weren't traveling? Basically, you sat and you learned Torah, or you were Osek in spirituality. You weren't involved in farming. You weren't involved in business. You were totally under the Kanfei Ashchina. Now, Lamaisa, that does have a cost. Because when you're in that intimate proximity with God, every action has an immediate significance. So you do an Aveira, 10,000 people are wiped out here, 14,000 people are wiped out here. Meaning, when you live in a world of distance from God, like the world we live in, so there's not going to be the immediacy of cause and effect. So a person eats a ham sandwich, usually he's not going to drop dead right away. Usually. Because that's part of the concealment of the divine. In the Midbar, there was no concealment. There were no cover-ups. You were clearly and unequivocally in the presence of God, and therefore there was immediate cause and effect. That's in the Midbar. When we come to Eretz Yisrael, things are going to change. Now, of course, Eretz Yisrael vis-a-vis Chutz La'aretz is certainly more godly, but I'm not comparing Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz. I'm comparing Eretz Yisrael and the Midbar experience. And there, vis-a-vis the Midbar, there's going to be a tremendous concealment of the divine presence in Eretz Yisrael. We will no longer have the man coming from heaven. We will have to plow and plant and harvest and thresh. We will have to have businesses. We will have to dig ditches. We're not going to have the clouds of glory. We're not going to have an automatic traveling well. We'll have to dig wells. We'll have to have lawyers and doctors and accountants and build cities and fight wars. And it's going to be a much more materialistic type of existence in which the presence of God is not going to be that perceptible. Now, let's add another factor to the mix. We know that Moshe Rabbeinu eventually will not be allowed to enter Eretz Yisrael, and Moshe Rabbeinu dies before we enter Eretz Yisrael. And the reason for that is a sin of when Miriam died and we ran out of water, so Moshe had to create a new water supply, and he was told to speak to the rock. I mean, this is many pshatim, this is how Rashi understands it. And he hit the rock twice, and therefore it was decreed that he cannot go to Eretz Yisrael. This is called the Chet of the Mei Meriva, the sin of the waters of rebellion. Now, that's not going to happen until the 40th year. So this is 39 years before that. Okay? So this is many, many decades, or several decades before Moshe Rabbeinu commits that sin. And yet, if you remember last week's Parsha, there already was a public prophecy that Moshe was going to die, although they didn't give the reason. Do you remember that when Moshe kind of ordained 70 elders to be a Sanhedrin? So there were 2 elders who were not part of that group, but they were given divine inspiration, and they were prophesying, and these are the 2 figures, Eldad, Umedad, and Yehoshua, that's Moshe's assistant, gets very upset, and he runs to Moshe and he says, arrest them, put them in jail. And Moshe Rabbeinu gave the famous answer, I'm not angry, I wish that everybody would be prophets of God. Now, what is Yehoshua so upset about? Why is Yehoshua so upset? So Rashi says, Yehoshua was upset not over the fact that they were prophets, but over the specific prophecy that they were saying. And their specific prophecy was, Moshe will die, and Yehoshua will bring the Jewish people into Eretz Yisrael. And that upset Yehoshua. He didn't want to lose Moshe. Which means, although the sin for which Moshe was denied entry to the land did not occur until 39 years later, there's already a prophecy he's going to die. Now, that raises an interesting philosophical question of free will, because apparently Moshe would have had free will not to do the Aveira, but how could that be if there's a prophecy he's going to die? Okay, that's a good question. I'll leave that question. But the point I want to make is, from the time of Eldad Umedad, it was known that Moshe will die before we enter Eretz Yisrael. So now, let's combine these 2 points. Point number 1 is that in Eretz Yisrael, there is much more concealment of the divine than there is in the desert. And point number 2 is, Moshe is going to die before we get to Eretz Yisrael. So the Meraglim, the 10 Meraglim that gave a negative report, had a certain spiritual calculus. Let's think, let me give you a mashal to illustrate this. Let's imagine you've spent many, many years in Kollel, totally immersed in the spiritual world of Torah learning. But at some point, because of a growing family, you have to leave the Kollel and go into the working world. And quite naturally, you might be afraid to go into that world, because that's a world of many, many nisyonos. It's a world much more of materialism, of rat race, of competition, of jealousy, of ethical problems in business. There'll be less learning because you'll be involved in the business, and you're literally frightened about the new environment that you're going to be facing. So what might your attitude be? I need a little more time in Kollel to fortify me and give me the strength and the resources to deal with the challenges of my new environment. Right? A person might say that. I got to be here a little longer. The Meraglim had the identical cheshbon. Going from the Midbar to Eretz Yisrael is like going from Kollel to the business world. And to go to Kollel to the business world and then also lose your guide and your teacher, Moshe Rabbeinu, is a very frightening proposition. So the Meraglim's intention, according to this pshat, was not that we don't want to go to Eretz Yisrael at all. Yeah, we do want to go. But right now, we're not ready for it. And the consolation prize is, the longer we're in the desert, the longer we have Moshe Rabbeinu. I think that's very critical. So let's hold on a little bit. Let's stay in Kollel. Let's stay in Kollel a little bit. Let's build up our ruchnius so we can face the challenge in the right way. So this was a chet l'shem shamayim. They had a certain spiritual calculation. So now you always have this problem. Once we've given them such a great spiritual calculation, so what's the sin? Isn't that a right cheshbon? The answer is no, it's not a right cheshbon. Because number one, you're second guessing God. God told you to go. So you're making a cheshbon. Oh, it's better for me spiritually if I don't go? HaKadosh Baruch Hu happens to disagree with you. But in a more philosophical way, here is the point. The very purpose of the Torah is to translate its mitzvos into actual life. Meaning, Torah is not about escaping a confrontation with the physical world. It's about dealing with the physical world and elevating it, creating cities and armies and agriculture and lawyers and doctors. Lawyers probably didn't need, but doctors, accountants. Because what you're doing is you're actualizing the Torah into the world of action. That's really what Eretz Yisrael is ultimately about. What Eretz Yisrael is ultimately about is take all the learning and create a society of goodness and Torah. Now, of course, we're not there yet, obviously. And until Mashiach comes, we're not going to fully realize it. But that's the whole idea. Don't run away from the physical and material. Embrace it and elevate it. So that's one idea. There's another idea, Rav Tzadok says, that the same way a person has to have emunah in Hashem, of course, you also have to have emunah in yourself. Meaning, on some ways, the chet of the Meraglim was not so much a lack of faith in God, it was a lack of faith in their capacity to carry out the mission. But here you have to believe, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives you a task, He gives you the strength and the ability and the wherewithal to carry out the task. When you sell yourself short, it becomes an excuse not to do what Hashem wanted you to do with your life. And we will have regret for that much later. I think I mentioned more than once that some say that the nature of Gehenna, what is hell? Hashem shows you the life you could have had and you should have had. and you didn't do. And when you see that life, what that life should have been, that creates an unbearable pain because of all that could have been. So the Kotzker Rebbe says, this is a reference, a famous word, when they described the Canaanites who were so gigantic. So they said, we were in our eyes like grasshoppers, and so we were in their eyes. So the Kotzker Rebbe says, everything starts from your self-perception. You view yourself as an insignificant grasshopper, then that's what you become in the eyes of others. If you didn't view yourself that way, then that wouldn't have been the case. Okay, it's not an objective reality. They perceive themselves as weak, as ineffectual, as not being capable. So that became a self-fulfilling prophecy. And in many, many ways, according to this, the wandering in the desert for 40 years was almost not a punishment. It was what they asked for. They wanted more time with Moshe, you got it. You want more time in the desert kollel, you got it. The thing they didn't like was they had to die in the process. That's true. But in a sense, they wanted more time. They got more time. That's what they wanted, right? They wanted Moshe. In other words, Moshe lived 40 or 39 more years because of the Chet HaMeraglim. Because given the fact that he would have died one way or the other before they entered Eretz Yisrael, I'm not sure how that would have worked. So if they would have entered right away, which was the plan, before the sin of the spies, we were like 10 days away. You understand that? We were, the Chumash says in Parshas Devarim, that from Kadesh Barnea, which is the place where we sent the spies, to Eretz Yisrael, is a journey of 11 days. People don't always follow this. Meaning to say, in the hypothetical reconstruction of what if, had there not been the Chet HaMeraglim, we would have been in Eretz Yisrael in 11 days. Now, I don't know what that means. That means Moshe would have died like 11 days, within a week or whatever it would be. So essentially, the Meraglim got Moshe to live another 39 years by delaying the Eretz Yisrael. But this was the idea of the Chet L'Shem Shemayim. And the final lesson is a very important lesson, and that is, if you despise the gifts that Hashem offers you, you will not merit those gifts. Eretz Yisrael is a very, very precious gift. The spies and the people despised it. They didn't want it. They thought it wasn't good. They thought it was too dangerous. So Hashem is not going to sit around and convince you how good it is. It's kind of a tough stance. You don't like it, you don't get it. Hashem could have argued, oh, it's wonderful, etc., he says. So we have to think very much about this in terms of our own attitudes towards Eretz Yisrael. Do we look at it as a gift? Do we appreciate it? Are we grateful for the opportunity to live here, to learn here? Because if we don't have that hakaras hatov, then God forbid we could lose it. Okay, so these are different lessons of the Chet HaMeraglim. Don't second-guess God with your own calculations. Recognize that if you look at yourself as ineffectual, that becomes a negative, self-fulfilling prophecy. And finally, he who does not appreciate the gifts of Hashem may not have the ability to enjoy them and benefit from them. And we must look at Eretz Yisrael as one of the great, great gifts that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us. Okay, stop here and y'all have a good weekend.
Thank you for listening to this Ohr Somayach production. To find out more and to partner in our mission, please visit ohr.edu.